when I have gotten involved with an AI, Heather, I'm really interested in your take on this, and BJ's also. But when I'm like creating this podcast, AI, not that it's given us any, we're not following any script, but it gave us a lot of information on how to do this. We didn't have, like, this would not have been possible. And maybe that's one of the big faults of AI. This shouldn't be possible. I don't know. But
Unleashing RBS on the world, yes.
yeah, my concern about it is that it's incredibly seductive for me. And it's seductive because it gives me a real shift. It gives me something that is
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. And I should clarify when I say it's not real, like your response to it is still real. Like Zach Stein would say, let it be a tool, but don't train it to appear like it's human. Like just let it answer the questions that you're asking it and give you the information that you want, but not with this kind of layer of empathy and compassion. And
And
I
that's
think it
more
can be a
honest.
useful tool. It's there are
Not
ways
as
where it's made a lot of
manipulative.
people's lives easier.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that then Zach is talking about the manipulation layer,
Yeah.
right?
Where
The
it's
layer
like,
that's meant to affect us and make it feel like to create the shift and all of that, other than just helping us, like seeking knowledge. I found it to be an
yeah.
incredible tutor around like if I ask it about architecture or something, and again, I know that it might not be correct, right? With the information it gives me. But there's certain information, like, in the canon of musical theory, it's pretty crisp. It hasn't given me anything incorrect. And it's, wow, that really speeds along my creative process if I feel stuck on something and it's not telling me what to do. I'm just asking it, like, how does this harmonic structure work? And it gives me a really easy to digest explanation. I'm like, oh, and then it takes my mind off into a bunch of different directions and creative directions that it would have taken me a while reading it and trying to process it. Um, yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, wow, it kind of blew my mind at what it might be able to do with teaching people mathematics and things like that, but it doesn't have to kiss your ass along the way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's very succinctly put.
But I'm even when you were saying Beej, which I agree with you, and there's a other side to that too. Sometimes that learning and that growing is the slow process, the reading, the
Mhm.
struggling. Like
Mhm.
math, if, as somebody who had failed math and then became a math teacher, it was these years and years of struggling with it that opened up doors. And had I had easier access to some of the problems, I wouldn't have been forced to spend hours struggling and then waiting another day to go talk to my professor or waiting for his office hours to ask this question. I could have just gone to AI and asked the question, but I don't know if I would have learned it as much, right? Like,
The value of slow learning. Yes, yes. I mean, there's a value in slow learning without a doubt with thinking about something, letting it turn over in your head, trying to puzzle something out, taking the time to puzzle something out versus having an answer fed to you immediately. And the immediacy of information is one of the most seductive things about it to me.
Yeah. But I, my big worry is I think these companies are trying to have it replace human relationships. So it's not just about like the knowledge or the information they can give you. They've have all these like chatbot friends and like, and soon they're going to have like adult chatbot friends. It's like they, this is because that's where the engagement is. I hear these stories all the time where they originally started using it for some project they were working on, but then it became like a friend and then they wanted more and more to spend their time with it, like on a sort of more interpersonal level. And so my thing is, let it be a tool, but it shouldn't replace human relationships. And the sort of bind that I was talking about earlier is we have to get better at human relationships, you
So
know?
how do we do that? You got 1 minute to give us the answer on how to get better at human relationships.
Well, I mean, a big part of it, John, I think is about coming back into our bodies and learning how to speak from that place and be more authentic in our lives and like make it a priority to try and connect more with others. And
That's unpleasant sometimes.
yeah,
It's
that's
hard.
part of the bind, isn't it? You know, it's part of the bind. So,
When there's real conflict, as our world polarizes, which again, I'm a fan of polarization because, I use this example. I think Nazi Germany wasn't polarized at all. It was very unified, consolidated, and polarization might have helped them, in the larger dominant society. It was very polarized with a couple of populations. But we have this polarized, kind of violent society now, right? Like it really is a right, wrong, good, bad vibe between us. And again, I'm not saying that's not right, but how do you navigate that? Heather, and where does your art come in? Like your art, I was thinking this immediacy that BJ and I were talking about a little bit. Your art is it's the
Opposite.
extreme opposite. It's not
Yeah.
just mildly opposite. It is the extreme opposite of fast results.
yeah.
I don't think there's any art form probably even less extremely slow than what you do.
Should I talk about what I do for the potential
I
listeners?
think that would be great. I would love to hear.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
I don't have any examples to show you because they're all at the studio. But
Do you have a website that they could go to if they wanted to see?
yeah, it's just heathertalbotfineart.com. So I've always worked in this very photorealistic style, and it's always been, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty devotional practice, whatever medium I'm working in. So originally I would do these like really highly detailed black and white drawings. John has one of these actually.
Yeah, I can go get it.
They're drawings of kind of close-ups of some element in nature. So originally I was doing drawings of seeds that had germinated in test tubes. So there was something quite weird and abstract about them. They looked a bit alien-like. But the concept was really about understanding or thinking about the world from this more ethereal level where sometimes how I describe it is like if you were to zoom out from here, just zoom out and zoom out and zoom out until you're kind of like, millions of miles away, then everything is just like mainly empty space. And then occasionally there's some like planetary body or a sun or something, but vast empty space. And then if you zoom in and you zoom in and you zoom in and you zoom in, and you're at this sort of subatomic level, it's like everything is just this empty space, except for these like small elements that are kind of moving around. And then we exist in this like little crust that feels solid, but actually it's still mainly empty space with elements moving around, So I was trying to kind of find some way of communicating this more ethereal concept with those drawings. And then I wanted to work in color, but I wanted to keep this idea of these like small elements that kind of come together to make a whole. So then I was doing these like highly, highly detailed photorealistic embroideries into photographs. So I did a series on bees where all the bees were like hand embroidered, like really small, but they would take me like months to complete. And then I got more interested in animism, the concept of the natural world also being alive. And, a lot of indigenous cultures like really understand this. They talk about all my relations and Mother Earth. Yeah, there's aliveness that we're in relationship with. And so I started working in wool, making needle felted sculptures so that I could make the subject of the image almost like it was kind of growing out. I was kind of reanimating it, like so it's growing out into the living room or wherever the art is. So that's what I do now. I do sculptures, wall sculptures of the forest and mushrooms. There's a theme that runs throughout that has to do with complex systems and how one element of a system might seem like small and insignificant, but it's a really important part of this larger system. So for example, a mushroom is the fruiting body of a much larger mycelial network underground or in a tree. And that network is used by the trees to kind of transport nutrients and things like that.
Well, one thing I just want to add that I know about some of your work is you actually use some dyes made from mushrooms, correct?
But
Like
yeah,
you,
yeah, I
like,
don't like. So I worked with this local indigenous artist who specializes in using natural dyes, particularly mushrooms. I'd found out from a mycologist that there are a lot of mushrooms that are UV reactive. They react to UV light and they'll kind of glow. So if you were to go out at night with a UV light and shine it in the forest, you would find some mushrooms that kind of react to that light. And so this mycologist told me that you can dye wool with some of these UV reactive mushrooms, and the wool will also become UV reactive. And so there was a project where I wanted to make a needle felted wall sculpture where the mushrooms in the art glowed like they would in real life under a UV light. So that was definitely a fun project, especially because it's like a totally natural thing.
so that's what my curiosity here is, because we're talking about the nervous system, and these are, pretty heady. Actually, not really, but they could be heady discussions, what you're sharing. I'm curious how that lands, if you care to say, how that lands in your body, all of this, the artwork, like
Yeah.
what is that like somatically for you? And from a nervous system perspective, like are you in your head or are you in your body or a combination of both? Or what the fuck does that even mean, right? Like,
Yeah. I don't know quite if this is answering your question, but the answer I want to give, because I've been thinking about this sort of mini documentary that I'm going to be doing. So I've been thinking a lot about what I want to say. And it feels a little grandiose or conceited or something to say, like, I want to make work that makes people care about the environment and do something to change what's happening, because there's so much destruction of the environment. It feels a little grandiose to say that. But actually, because I've been thinking so much about this, what I've sort of landed on is that because this work is so time consuming and it's such fine work, like I really do sit there for hours. So yeah, so I I think that I kind of enter into a slightly different state. And I'm not actually sure, John, what nervous system state that would be. Like, it's definitely a sort of flow state, but I'm not sure quite how to track that onto maybe a ventral vagal predominant state, like, because I don't feel stressed. It's like time just kind of stretches out, and I've been working on this like tiny little fern, and before I know it, like 4 hours have gone by. So there's something that I am experiencing when I'm making the work, and the sense I have when people look at the work and they kind of come into this like relationship with the work is that some of that is kind of translated where they can feel that depth and that depth of time and attention, and that is a good thing to bring into the world. It's so kind of antithetical to the way most of us move through the world that just feels really fast. It feels very much like it's all about sort of survival physiology most of the time, as we move through our
Not the
days.
work you're doing. The work you're doing is more of a connection
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. But I just
physiology.
mean like generally as we move through life, it's like there are these kind of existential risks that are present kind of all the time in the background. And then there's the kind of just daily hustle of like, can I pay my rent, my mortgage, like, and then this sense of social isolation. People don't feel connected and supported, so there's a lot of layers to this disconnection and what I would describe as trauma physiology. But there is something, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here, but
Please do.
there is something about when people come into my studio and they just kind of sit with the work. I've noticed this over and over again. They just kind of stand there and look at it. And I've had people actually stand and look at it for like a long time, like a long time. And I think that they are tuning into something that feels, it feels really important. I was going to say potent, but even that's not quite the right word because it's so subtle. Can I share a quote with you? Because this to me, like, sort of sums up what I'm trying to do here. Is that
And
okay?
before you share the quote, I'd just like to reflect something, if I may, that you've said a few things, and I'm glad you went back to it about tooting your own horn. But when you said you don't want to sound grandiose and you don't want to sound too big, this is very important to me. This, the tagline of this podcast, Learning to Howl, is accessing power, connection, and purpose. And to me, what
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about isn't grandiosity. The larger world, when we have somebody with like you with this very, there's not even words, important, potent, whatever it is. Those aren't the words can't even speak to what the work you're doing. Like you said, people just stand there in awe. It's not necessarily because you're the greatest or you're this amazing artist who's producing, right? It's that you are channeling something. You are channeling, I talk about life force a lot. What that work you do is loaded with life force. And so it's not even grand. God, there's no words for it, but it is a channel of life force. You are a channel of life force. And
Yeah, that I like to think of it that way, is that I'm sort of a conduit for something to sort of help people access something that is
Mhm.
around them and inside them. You
that
know,
is important. That
yeah.
is important. That's why you're here talking to us today.
Your art is you're creating access points for people.
Hmm.
When somebody stands there motionless, taking it in, because I've done that. I've been stunned by your art. And part of my brain is thinking, wow, how long did it take to do that and that? But then that part starts to quiet down, and the rest of it is, there's this love of the bees. There's this cherishing of the mushroom, and that lands in my. That's where my system starts to go into that ventral vagal dominant state, and it pulls me into something like, I mean, God, I mean, without art and music and stuff like that to bring us into these states, not just manipulate us and entertain us and distract us. Like your art is the opposite of that, of distraction. It's actually something that brings what's important into focus. And actually, like what John was saying, I don't know, grandiose is not even close to the right word. It's importance. It's an important thing. When I saw your art the first time, I'm like, what the hell is this? You know, I was like, and then you started to explain it to me, and I was just like, wow, like the process, and then seeing you do the process is kind of like, you know, your drawing. I've seen you do your drawing. Like you did a incredible ink piece at our house once. You were sitting at our dining
Yeah.
room table drawing, and I was just like, wow. I just was standing over your shoulder watching and just kind of mesmerized. And you were in a flow state. And I felt like I shouldn't say anything because I don't want to interrupt the flow state, you know, because I was kind of along for the ride. My nervous system was like getting on board with that. Wow. And then I walked over into the kitchen. I just remember feeling lightness and connection. And so that is something very real that you as Heather, the human being, and you as Heather, the artist, are bringing into the world. And I would like to circle back around because you were talking about your personal evolution, and John so rudely interrupted. I'm
I
just
was going to say,
joking.
Beach didn't want to interrupt your flow state, but I would have.
Yeah, John doesn't have a problem with that. No, but actually wanted to go back because you were talking about your personal evolution in art, and you had gotten to the point where you talked about the mushrooms and the mycelium network and that. And that's when John actually was, you know, asked the interesting question about your natural dyes. But I kinda wanna get back on that train of your evolution because I was getting into flow state. As I was watching, Heather, the artist, grow in front of in my mind's eye, you know? So,
Can I read you this quote first?
yes.
Okay, so this was actually in a book I read um, called Transformative Adaptation, and it's more about like how, as environmentalists, you can address the kind of crisis point that we're in now. So in this book, they quote he's a nuclear chemist, and I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly. It's Pregoin, I think. But he said, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lead the entire system to a higher order. And I
Wow.
read that and I was like, I think that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I think that's what the art is for. And I actually think that's in a very small scale. When I'm doing the touch work, I think that's what I'm trying to do as well.
Small islands of coherence. Was that the quote?
Read it again. When a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lead the entire system to a higher order.
So again, I want to invite just coming into body with that, giving that a minute to just settle, like let that come down from the head and just imagine that or experience that or feel that. Small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. And I think that's the aspiration of what BJ and I are doing with learning to howl is to be a small island of coherence. Maybe that's the hope.
Yeah, and in the using it in the sort of SE terminology, I think it's also important to clarify coherence doesn't have to mean super calm. It just means that like everything is organized and kind of in flow together, in the response. But I feel like, yeah, there's something about what I'm trying to do through my art, which is kind of like creating those little islands where there's a lot of depth and a lot of presence, you know, that people can then access that in themselves when they come into a relationship with it. I'm not sure that I've answered your question though, BJ.
No, I mean, for me, my question was more about like I wanted to hear the rest of like your journey. You were getting close to where you are now, I think. I
Hmm.
was just like, that I was getting into flow state, like,
Well,
hearing
I
about
guess,
how you developed as an artist.
yeah, I guess the last thing to say is more recently, I've been um, doing felts on a much larger scale because for me, because they take so long, even making something that's like, you know, 9 by 12 it's like a big undertaking. But I really wanted to work on a bigger scale, and I made a much bigger piece that was like 24 by 30 that it's currently on display at Vancouver International Airport.
What are the measurements? What are the units there? 24.
Sorry, inches, sorry. Yeah, which still isn't that big, but it took me most of the year to make it, you know. I guess I wanted there to be more to dive into. Um, and I guess the other thing I'll say about kind of where I'm at now is that this interest in uh, complex systems still applies because a forest, which, forests are threatened all over the world, old growth forests particularly, um, they're much more complex than, you know, any like second growth or, uh, you know, farmed forest. Um, the amount of life that they support is different. These forests, they make a huge difference to our air quality throughout the entire atmosphere. And they sequester huge amounts of carbon, and we need them. We need them for our survival, and just because they're beautiful.
As opposed to like really easy access to wood to build more houses or
Well, I would say as
make
opposed to,
toilet paper.
yeah, I think a
Although
lot of the old growth is getting cut down for very wealthy people's, you know, cabins that they visit once a year or something, you know.
not used for toilet paper, I understand pulp. I As we start to wrap up, um, and I'm gonna go get that drawing that you referenced, and then you and BJ can talk a little bit while I'm gone, of course. But I noticed this kind of like BJ was like, "Oh yeah, I want to get into this flow state," and I'm curious. You said something about organized islands of coherence are not necessarily calm. I like that, yeah, because when you said that and read that, I like to fight, and I think about all of our. We have a common duo of instructors, Burns Galloway and Linda Stelt, and I just when you shared that, I remember multiple times with Burns where I had lost my shit, right? Where I went into a state of anger or rage even. And I would go to Burns and talk about that because I felt some accompanying sense of shame afterwards. Or I'd be like, I'm not okay. And Burns would be like, Are you just really angry and upset? Or are you not okay? And I'm like, Oh, I'm really angry and upset. You know, or one time I tore off a bunch of outlet covers, where we live. This guy had covered all our outdoor outlets where we plug our cars in when it's -30 or -40. And I was so enraged because we had, as a community, said, don't do this. And the guy went and had it done. So I took this big screwdriver, this massive screwdriver, ripped all these covers violently off, and just damaged stuff. And I talked to Burns the next day and I'm like, man, I feel so embarrassed about doing that. And Burns was like, well, I think my reflection was, he was like, oh, that sounds like a reasonable response. And so that was coherent. In that rage, there was coherence. So I'm glad you said it doesn't necessarily mean calm. It means organized. Anyway, I want to throw my counter to Beej's flow state.
Yeah, John.
This VJ shared one of our episodes with a friend, and she had shared it with this guy, a jock guy, she said. And his response was, after listening to it, it made him gayer.
And he said, first of all, I really love BJ and that other guy. So it was kind of yeah, I think we'll have to put that, if we ever get a website together for this, I think we'll
Learning
have to
to
put
howl.
that. It'll make you gayer.
It'll make you gayer.
Well, yeah, it's pretty funny.
I'll be right back. You guys do what you need to do.
So, yeah, I think that now that we have John to not interrupt constantly. No, I mean, I love the guy, I know a lot of people out there like, wow, BJ is really like, he's got like somebody like John he can orient to in times of stress and whatever. And if you don't have somebody like John in your life, I feel sorry for you. And if you do have somebody like John in your life, I feel much more sorry for you. So, he's a pain in the ass. Okay, whatever. But seriously, I think I would like to get some of your art. And as you're talking about it, in the earlier, I would like to get some really good pictures and just kind of like put them in to the video portion of the podcast so that people can see some of the stuff you do. And I'm not sure that pictures will ever do it justice as when you're witnessing it and your eyes can take in the relief, like the slight three-dimensionalness of it, because there is that piece of it does feel like it pulls me in, and like the gleam on the wool or the silk of the bees, or the warmth of the wool, for talking about your textile art, that's really hard to get it on the same level as being in the presence of it. Your drawings, on the other hand, I've seen pictures because I took a picture of one. I have to look that one up. And it's just like, yeah, I think that translates very well, in a picture. So yeah. And John's got something he wants to hold up, and there's some reflection off of the.
Yeah, that's sorry. The problem is that it's behind glass, so it's kind of hard to.
Yeah. John, what I'm going to recommend is you take a good picture of it.
I can just send you guys some pictures.
Well,
does that come out okay?
Yeah, you can kind of see.
There's a little bit of reflection. There's some reflection.
So this is it's a drawing of a photograph. So.
And what was it? What was it? Ink?
Yeah, it's just actually. I say this is because of my working class roots. I don't like using traditional art materials. So I made that drawing with just a regular ballpoint pen from a dollar store.
Yeah, serious. And what are we looking at? What part? What species?
So it's not like, I think it's not a morel. It's a different kind of mushroom where it's actually just much closer up than you would think. I've forgotten the name. It's a kind of polypore, I think. But it's just very like
Yeah, I thought it was a morel at first, and then I realized that it's too tight for a
Yeah.
morel, but
Yeah,
it's still
exactly.
super cool.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, as we wrap up, is there anything, you would like to give us advice or reflection or how this was for you or?
I want to share another quote with you. Is that okay?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
So there's this quote that I've always loved for a long time by this guy called Srinivasagadatta, who was like an Indian mystic, I guess. And he used to say, wisdom tells me I'm nothing. Love tells me I'm everything. And between the two, my life flows.
Beautiful.
I think
That's a
it's a
lovely
good
quote. Yeah.
paradoxical truth to live by, so that we don't get too self-important, but we also know we're really important.
I'm the one who doesn't feel very important, and BJ thinks he's the most important, so.
I was holding back there, John. I was trying to be professional. Because when you you said like life, like I'm so important. I'm like, well, that's John thinking he's so important.
And Beej, he's so in the flow state.
Not when you're around, bub. No. No, this is you and me arguing and flipping shit back and forth is definitely a form of flow state, man, without doubt. And I
Totally.
think that Heather got such a big dose of that just for the audience. So the audience knows our relationship. Heather and John were in cohort together through their SE training and became very good friends. And the part where John was himself feeling all of his fight energy and a lot of people moved away and just a few people moved in. Again, that very much echoed John and I in our first real interaction was quite violent, with a pretty heavy duty physical fight that I believe may have led to lifelong injury. Anyway, to me, that's really interesting that you and I were two of the people that weren't intelligent enough to walk away from John.
You and Heather,
I want to say I was drawn to your authenticity, John. And even though people don't necessarily come towards it because it's perhaps intimidating for some people, or I don't know what their reasoning is, but I think people really love you because of that, and that is kind of like pretty universally, if I tell people who know you that I'm going to see you, they're always like, oh, I love John, like people really appreciate that about you. I feel that there's a dearth of it in our culture, so.
I agree 100% with that. And don't get a fat head, John. Anyway.
I'm really, love tells me I'm the most important.
But okay, so back to
where
you were trying to get to, BJ.
Yeah. So the story of how we got together is that John and I have known each other since we were 19. From our first real interaction there, and a couple of years later, we became very good friends. So we've known each other for a while. Heather and John have known each other for some years, from their SE training. And when I was going through SE training, John was a teacher's assistant of the cohort up in Vancouver, British Columbia, where you live, and he would stay with you when he was teaching. And so my first year was online, and he's like, hey, man, come on up. Well, it'll be like a buddy. Every module that we do together will be kind of like it'll be buddy time. We'll get to hang out. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, sounds great. So, and he asked you, would it be okay if this guy stays with us? Because he was staying with you. And you're like, yeah, sure. And so every day from that first module together, it was so sweet because John would have to stay late and you would come pick me up and I just felt like a child being picked up from school. So I would jokingly call you mom, and you're like, "What's this guy who's like 20 years older than me calling me mom?" It was really weird. And then we started acting like when John and I, like, one of our shticks would be acting like your children, and always seeking your favorite. Who's your favorite son, mom? That kind of stuff. And
Well, Wolfie too. Wolfie was
yeah, Wolfie's
Pops,
Pop.
right?
Yeah, we call him Pops. Yeah. So,
But you were sort of like camping out in our living room, so we didn't have a big like place. So you guys were like, it's sort of like this kind of sleepover vibe, So
it
I think
was
that
it was like
added to
SE
the
camp.
we were the
Yeah,
parents.
it was totally somatic experiencing camp. We'd get home from all day of it. We'd sit and have a nice dinner together, and we would talk until it was time to go to bed. And then you guys would go to bed, and John and I would like be rudely loud, talking and making each other laugh, and even waking up in the middle of the night, with the loud, angry voos. And it's just been, it was part of my training, my life, that experience getting to know you and Wolfie so well over that 2 years. I'm just so grateful for all of that. When John said, yeah, he wanted to interview you, I'm like, oh, that's going to be fun. And it has been, it's been wonderful. I really appreciate you giving us this time and coming on and helping us get this little endeavor off the ground.
Yeah, I appreciate you too as well. I was just having this memory, BJ, of like one of the time, I forget which visit it was, but you hadn't been here long, and we were all sitting in the garden. You were just playing guitar, and I was, tending to my vegetables, and John was telling us about the latest crazy interaction he'd had with some unhoused person. I think Wolfgang was still at work, but yeah, it was just so lovely.
In Kelowna.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you guys were here when Trump got reelected as well, which is, I was really glad to have you here for that.
Yeah, at 3 a.m.
to process it at 3 a.m. Yeah.
We all got up and we were all just like, oh my God, this is like, we were together, thank goodness. And I also think about the time BJ's friend got murdered.
Yeah.
And he was there we were all together. Like, really in addition to just wonderful times together, and with Wolfie also, and just all of us developing a friendship, there were some very traumatic events, tragedies that happened while we were together too. And
it was, if I couldn't be with my family for the election and for Ernie's death, I was surrounded by love and support, and that was something that I think about once in a while. It's like, wow, the good fortune that I've had to meet you and become a friend.
Yeah, you with your SE
and
family.
I've really missed you a lot, and this has been great.
Yeah, it's so good to see you.
Well, I love you guys. I have to go.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, BJ.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Heather. Well, whatever, I want to say again, it's heathertalbotfineart.com. Is that correct? Yes. And we're going to try to scrape up some pictures to throw on the screen while she was talking and telling some of her story. And I'm pretty excited about this episode. I really think this is like a great place to start for us.
Well, I hope you can get something good, because I still am recovering from this cold, and I hope that wasn't too disruptive for the.
I think it's going to be fine. I think it's going to be that's not going to be a problem.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, well, give Wolfie a big hug from us.
I will do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Love you guys.
Bye.
And to the listeners out there, we hope you go into your day, your evening, feeling well.
As an island of coherence.
Islands of coherence.
Yes.
That's right.
Right on.
All right.
Bye,
between
guys.
love and wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll talk, Heather.
All right. Bye.